What is up, PCP Army? Welcome here to Pop Culture Philosophers. I am Rockin Robbie Billups. Station, everybody. It's a very exciting Rockin Robbie Live tonight. I know that this is something that for the over the last 5 years, a lot of people have been clamoring for, but we're small fish here. But luckily, the big fish decided to fuck around with the small fish. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you, it is my esteemed pleasure to bring to you the voice when it comes to comics YouTube. From Pop Culture Explained, from Comics Explained, and so many other channels and other projects. Y'all, you know them. It's Rob. What's up, Station?
What's up, dude?
Thank you for being here, homie.
Yeah, man.
Well, now that you're here and everybody knows that this is real and it's really happening. And by the way, is it real? Like when Rob popped on, I was like, I always thought that you were like maybe like an animatronic from like Showbiz Pizza or Chuck E. Cheese or something. Like you're on a level where I didn't even know you were real, man. It's crazy.
No, I love, like, I do that all the time. Like, I'll jump onto YouTube and I'll just see what other comic book YouTubers are like creating content. Because I watch a lot of comic book YouTubers. A lot of people don't think I do. A lot of people think that I just make videos and then I'm just like off to other stuff. And I am kind of busy in that way where I don't watch them all the time. But like, I'll get on YouTube and I'll just search for comics and then just go to live channels and then just watch channels that are live. So I've seen like auction channels and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
hell yeah.
It's fun.
Keeping your feet firmly planted, because here's the thing. You're one of the OG guys, you know, like you've been doing this for a long time. I think, when did you start Comics Explained? Was it 2013? Something like that? Yeah,
something like that. I mean, God, it's been almost 7 years now.
Wow.
Time flies, man. Like sometimes it's hard to even believe that it's been this long, but yeah, it's been almost, I'm closer to 10 years than I am far away from 10. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
It's been almost 10 years.
It's like when you realize that the time that's happened since Phantom Menace is longer than the time from Phantom Menace to New Hope, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, basically.
What? Time is flying. As we get older, it seems to go faster. There's this idea that time is going faster, but I think it's just that we have more. Anyway, you've been a busy man here for the last 7 years. We started our channel in 2015. And you were one of the first. Like, I remember looking and seeing, it was just like, at that time, all I could find was you, Comic Storian, and Comic Pop. That was like all that I knew was out there.
Yeah.
And now it's blossomed in this whole community of big channels, super channels, small channels. This whole community. We have proven that comic books are worth it, you know? So what got you into comic books, Rob?
It was actually my dad. Well, it was a combination of my dad and X-Men the Animated Series, right? Because, and I tell people this story all the time because that's like the first thing everybody asks me, right? Is like, what got you into comics? And it initially started out with me just kind of watching X-Men the Animated Series and Batman the Animated Series when I was a little kid. And I was so enamored by X-Men that I wanted to see what else was there. And so I remember my dad going out and getting me 2 comic books. He got me a Batman comic, and I can never remember what the issue was. And then he got me a comic called Sovereign 7, which was a terrible comic. It was written by Chris Claremont after he left Marvel.
I remember
that. It was a garbage comic book. It sucked. They tried to put like Power Girl on it to get people to read it, and like no one cared. But after that, I was like, okay, like I don't really care about Batman, and I want to read more X-Men stuff, right? So the first comic that I got is X-Men Volume 2, issue number 1, which I know it sounds cliche. And the funny thing, I went to a comic auction recently down in Sharpsburg, Kentucky. My former supervisor, who's a buddy of mine now, invited me down there. So myself and my fiance Mariah went there, and it was nuts, man. Like I think for like $100, I got the first maybe 20 issues of X-Men Volume 2, issue number 1. And then like for another 50 or 75, I got a whole bunch of Uncanny X-Men, which included issue number 200, where Magneto becomes a good guy. It's like this landmark X-Men issue.
He's got that purple costume with the M on it. Like
he's on the front. It's like this amazing landmark comic. So after reading the X-Men, I started reading like other stuff, because you know how comics are, right? You see like there's an X-Men crossover event, which at the time was Onslaught. And because of Onslaught, I started getting into other comic books, Captain America, the Avengers, stuff like that. And I've just been reading Marvel ever since. Never really looked back. But like the X-Men are my OG team, right?
Okay.
Like it's the one that I've been reading the most.
Especially with the animated series in the 90s, that was a big deal. I started reading in 86.
God, man, you've been reading longer than I. Like 10, you got 10 years on me, man.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's no big deal. But you got 2 years on me here on YouTube and like 2 million subscribers, so don't worry about it. But
no, that's all good, man.
I was into Superman and Fantastic Four, and that's what really like drew me in. And X-Men was the jam, in the 90s. And that's what's really cool is I grew up being a big Fantastic Four fan and always feeling like nobody cared about the Fantastic Four but me.
Oh, because they didn't. The Fantastic Four sucked in the 80s.
Exactly. I mean, everybody bought the issue where, Alicia Masters turned out to be a Skrull, but that was about it, right?
Yeah.
And and the Art Adams, new Fantastic Four. They had to bring in Wolverine, Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, and Hulk to make it a bestseller again.
Yeah.
But so Onslaught, to me, it's crazy that you mentioned that, because Onslaught, I was like, no, Onslaught's dope because it's making the Avengers and the Fantastic Four part of the story, because all anybody cared about in the 90s in Marvel was the X-Men. So that's really cool that you mentioned that, because Onslaught, I still think is one of the best X-Men events out there. Like, I really do.
Really?
So, yeah, I do.
I mean, it was fun, man, but in hindsight, it's like he's like the most pissed off thing ever, right? He's like Xavier's frustration and Magneto's hatred just coalesce. He's like the embodiment of Twitter in the modern age. It's like Twitter became sentient and just got pissed off at the world, and it'd be Onslaught.
Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza and Mark Wade called it. They foresaw the Twitter wave, right? The
in 30 years, we're going to have Twitter, so let's get started now.
No kidding. No, but what I loved about it was that it stressed importance on Fantastic Four and the Avengers. Like, I remember seeing Jean and Scott embrace and being like, they were the originals and they're what we strive to be. And I'm just, especially being like, what's that, 97? So being like a 16, 17-year-old kid who just loves Fantastic Four and Avengers and Superman, and everybody else loves Batman and X-Men and Spider-Man. So it was just really, really cool. We got a super chat. Thank you, Ace. He says, most times when I buy a new Marvel DC action figure, I go look up information on the character, and Comics Explained is there.
Well, that's awesome.
It is true, because anytime someone needs something explained to them, whether it's about comic books or pop culture or whatever, Rob is there. And here's the thing. This is what I love about your channel, Rob. You don't just explain what's going on. Like I watched a video recently of the last issue of Venom or something, right? And you're not just explaining what's happening in the book. You're explaining the emotions behind it. You're explaining the themes of it. You go far beyond just showing you the comic book so you don't have to buy it. You entice people to read it. So I want to know, what made you decide to start Comics Explained, or originally Marvel Explained?
Yeah, man. Marvel Explained back in the day. I haven't heard that name in a long time. Yeah, it was originally Marvel Explained when it first launched. Honestly, man, it was a couple different things. I was in a job that I wasn't too keen on. The people were great, but the job was one that I wasn't really digging, and I was kind of desperate to get out of it. And so I started. I was like, you know what? Like, I'd always wanted to be a YouTuber, which back in the day, I don't know if you remember, but back in the day on YouTube, when it was first blowing up, all you had was like vloggers and Call of Duty. And that was it. Right? That was just all you ever watched on YouTube. Just like vloggers, like just OG vloggers and Call of Duty. And so, so I always wanted to be a YouTuber. I always thought it'd be cool, right? I was kind of like romanced with it, right? The idea of like watching Machinima Respawn and all those guys. And, Machinima, of course, is defunct now. You don't really see anything over there anymore. But at the time, it was like the biggest thing on YouTube. And I was like, man, I want that life. Like, I want to do that. I want to be a YouTuber. And at the same time, I was still working at that job when the Avengers came out. And I remember getting on YouTube and seeing if there was like YouTube and other websites, see if there was like other stuff that I could learn, right? And at the time I started to realize that there was no market for that on YouTube, right? There was no YouTube channel that existed out there that would take like a soccer mom or a hockey dad and turn them into a comic book expert in like 30 minutes, right? Like, I mean, you're on your lunch break, eat a sandwich, become an expert on like Scarlet Witch, right? There was no YouTube channel like that. So I was like, okay, well then let's do that, right? Because I always liked the idea of teaching. I was like, let's combine that with comic books, right? And I'll just teach people about comics. And I started doing it. And initially, I didn't really know how to navigate those waters. So I actually sent a tweet out to a YouTuber named CNanners. And I was like, hey, man, like, I've been following you for a super long time. Like, how do I grow on YouTube? And he just said, network and make friends. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did that. And then I met Comic Storian. And then eventually we met Sal over at Comic Pop. And the rest is kind of history. But it was Comics Explained, or originally Marvel Explained, and then Comics Explained was just born out of a desire to just teach people about comic books, right? To take your average Joe who didn't want to be left out anymore and didn't want to go into like Avengers or go into Avengers 2 or Civil War, whatever movies were coming out at the time, and to have no idea what anybody's talking about when there's like, oh my God, it's Captain America's shield, or something along those lines. And to actually be filled in and to go in there and to be able to understand those conversations, right? That was the whole idea behind it. So, yeah.
It works. And what's cool is we first of all, the comic book community is a fantastic community. But like any community, there are definitely aspects of it that are better left kind of in the dark. And one of those is this idea of gatekeeping, like this knowledge. Like I want people, like I love your tag there, and it's on your channel. It's part of your pitch. Like I can make you a comics expert in 30 minutes. Yeah. And so many of us are like, no, I've read comics for over 30 years. I don't want people to become an expert in 30 minutes, but the way that you are so free with the information, the way that you want to educate and give it, it's so refreshing because there's so many people, especially here on YouTube, that just feel like, oh, I'm the expert. You can never know my ways. You bring it to the everyman, or as I like to call them at my shop, muggles. But you make muggles experts, man. It's cool.
Man. And I've seen that where people are just like, if you didn't get into comics back in the day, then you don't deserve to be in it now. That's a stupid philosophy, and they're stupid for believing it. Like the important thing to understand about comics, man, is it's not any of that. It's not any of that jargon, right? It's not, he said, she said, and all that kind of stuff. The whole idea of comics is, and for a lot of people like myself as a little kid, and I can tell you right now, for a lot of my fans, comics were an escape. Right. I mean, maybe they were socially awkward. Maybe they had a really bad home life. Maybe they were the kid being picked on all the time. But the reality was comics were a way for them to get away from whatever it was that was causing them problems. And if they were the kid being bullied, they could read, Spider-Man, because anybody could be the person behind the mask. And then suddenly, like, they're the person that gets the girl, or they're the person that gets back at the bully or something along those lines, and I think that's important. Right. I mean, the reality here is that comics have never been so popular. So I don't understand why somebody would approach the comic book scene from the perspective of like, no, like, if you haven't been reading for 10, 15, 20 years, then you don't need to know what's going on. And that's a bonehead decision. Right. I mean, it's like saying that, like, I mean, sure, mathematics was invented, X many years ago, right? 1,000 years ago, whatever it is. But unless you were studying it back then, you don't deserve to be a part of it anymore. And it's like, how can that's the most boneheaded philosophy that I've ever heard. So
can you imagine that? Like some kind of scientist or a mathematician being like, no, because you're new.
Yeah, because you're new. Exactly. That's silly, man. The reality is that comics are supposed to be fun and enjoyable, right? Just a way for us to kind of come together and inevitably argue over which character would beat which character, and debate about it for hours on end, and just enjoy a mutual thing that we all like. Right. So absolutely. I never agreed with the idea of gatekeeping comics. I always thought it was a ridiculous concept held, it was a ridiculous idea held by ridiculous people.
Exactly. I'm a comic book retailer as well. And so like the idea of trying to withhold any kind of excitement or information about comics from the populace is ridiculous to me. You want to grow, and you have definitely been partly responsible for the growth of this industry. I believe your channel, other channels that we talked about, Comistorian, Sal over at Comics Pop, y'all really paved the way for this whole community here on YouTube. Speaking of the YouTube community, one of my favorite YouTube comic channels is here, Comics with Bueller. He says, I have to come clean. My shop didn't get the last issue of Deceased Dead Planet. I watched your video to find out what happened.
Well, the hope, and here's the important thing to understand. The hope is that with my videos, people will want to go and get comics. Right, because the reality is, like, I'll cover, King in Black, but you're not going to get every single thing that happens over the course of a story, right? I'm not going to read page for page, what's going on. The idea is to be like, okay, this is a cool story. Now I'm going to go read it for myself, right? Because I will say there's a big difference between sitting down and watching one of my videos and then actually going over the comic yourself, because while I can get you caught up and I can kind of fill in the blanks and say, hey, like, here's everything that's going on with the story, here's the gloss over, sitting it down and reading it on your own, whether you do it digitally or physically, is really a whole different experience, because you just bring your own, I guess, your own thought process to it, or your own imagination or something along those lines. For example, whenever I sit down and read an Iron Man comic, I hear Robert Downey Jr.'s voice. Like it's just one of those things that kind of goes into it.
Nice. Right? I still hear the voice from the Iron Man animated series from the 90s for some reason.
I hated that show. I hated that show so much.
The second season's dope. The first season's really whack, but the second season's dope, man. I'll tell you that. But it had this great theme song where it's like, I am Iron Man. I remember I used to stay up. I used to wake up actually at in my area here in Alabama. They would play the Marvel Action Hour, which is Fantastic Four and Iron Man. They would play it at 5 a.m. on Sunday mornings. 5 a.m., bruh. So like I would wake up, and I was a big church goer then, and I was training to be a preacher. And so I would be at church like by 8, but like I would wake up at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning, most of my high school life, to watch Fantastic Four and Iron Man before church. It's ridiculous, but that's, I mean, like I said, it was all about the X-Men and Spider-Man, and the idea that they even had a show, you know, which of course here was regulated to 5 a.m. So whatever. That brings me, we're talking about Fantastic Four. I got a question.
What's up?
I want to know, what do you think? Because you're not just a comics expert. You're an expert on the entire mythology and how it translates into film. And you love talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And we'll get into some of those questions too. But what will it take to actually make a Fantastic Four movie work? What's your perspective on that?
Oh, man, what a question. It's actually a lot easier than people think. And there's different ways that they can approach it. You know, I would think, you know, I mean, okay. So you said you used to read Fantastic Four back in the 80s, right? So like you're familiar with like John Byrne's run.
That's where I started.
That's where you started. John Byrne's run. Okay. So like like his art, his writing and drawing of the Fantastic Four was amazing. Right. Yeah. The post John Byrne era is when it went, you know, it was bad. Yeah. But I think that you can take those elements of John Byrne, where he made the team more grounded and tangible, and kind of took it back to the days of focusing on family squabbles. That's certainly something that like needs to happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it's what made the Fantastic Four so great in the first place. Yeah. But in terms of the actual introduction of the team, I mean, all you do is just take it out of Avengers Endgame, right? I mean, that's really what's going to happen. Like everything that's happened so far, WandaVision, Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like it's all predicated on the events of Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. So all you say is that where you already have Shield, right? The strategic homeland, or not strategic homeland, where you already have SWORD, right? The Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Department. You know, you kind of expand that charter, so they're no longer just a sentient weapon monitoring organization, but they also serve their comic book counterpart, which is the Sentient World Observation and Response Department. So they kind of monitor space and monitor Earth for sentient weapons. And all you do is you just say, like, in the aftermath of everything that happened with Thanos, that like, you know, humanity and Shield and the governments of the world were just like, okay, so like we kind of got fucked, like on that whole thing, right? Like it was nuts. Like a giant purple guy came from space and wrecked the world, right? So like we need to not have that happen again. So they basically say, like, we're going to launch an initiative to essentially explore space, and that's where you get Reed Richards and Susan and Johnny and Ben, right? You just you know, by whatever manner and whatever means, you can go with the original or the Ultimate Universe story, where he's just like a child prodigy, or you go with the original Marvel Comics version, right, from the main Marvel Universe, where they basically were told, no, your mission's not going to launch, and they said, no, but it is though, and then just like literally hijacked a ship and flew it into space, right? So you can go that way too. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but I think bringing it off the shoulders of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, that's the best possible way to do it, in the sense that you already had that kind of standard there, right? You know, when you had the scene, I think it was in Avengers, when Nick Fury revealed that the reason why they were creating like this advanced weaponry was because of Thor, because like Thor showed up, and they were like, it's because of him, right? Like, you know, he showed us that like we're not alone here in the universe. And like Thanos kind of capitalized on that, right? Because as far as humanity was concerned, Thanos was like the worst case scenario. Thor was just like a guy who showed up and got drunk, right? And like threw a coffee cup on the ground. It was like, you know, another, you know, and like that was it. Right. But like Thanos showed up and literally had nefarious intentions against Earth and successfully blinked out half the life in the universe. That's a credible threat. Yeah. Right. And so I think, you know, building the Fantastic Four off of that makes the most possible sense. Here's my question. How would you do it?
Well, my initial idea was a very Captain America type thing, where they existed in the 60s. They understood that there was this other dimension that they could break through, and they went into the negative zone, basically. Right. And then they're gone. And they think they're dead. And so now you could do a movie where you'd be like, maybe you could do in the next Spider-Man movie, or the next whatever, Black Widow, whatever. Black Widow wouldn't work, but whatever. In some movie, you could have this idea that, oh, it's near the 50th anniversary of when the the famous four disappeared after trying to explore other dimensions. And then they show back, and you could do a Captain America type thing where, you know, they haven't aged much because they've been off in the multiverse. It's kind of what Dan Slott did, you know, when they were off doing their thing post Secret Wars. But that was my original idea. But I'm really into this idea now that this is a team that was formed to study sentient life and threats out in the universe. And maybe someone told them no, and they went anyway, because that's a very important thing to the origin story that gets knocked off in these adaptations, is the fact that they were told no, but they went anyway. And that is what really separates Reed and Ben and Susan and Johnny from your typical scientists and explorers in the Marvel universe, is the fact that even if you tell them no, they're going to go anyway. That's the whole point of the Fantastic Four, is they're self-operating now. Yeah. They're doing their own thing. And it's all about explorations. I love the Mark Waid run, where he said they were Imaginauts. They're not superheroes. They're not stopping bank robberies and shit. You know, they're exploring new things. And yeah, Reed gets them into a lot of deep shit, but you know, so I think that's a really good idea, is to tie it in there. And you got a great perspective on here. A couple super chats to mention. Stefan says, loving the segment between two Robs. Make it a regular thing. Yeah, instead of the Ferns, we'll just have standees of us. Yeah, that would be great. And I think we had another one. B Black said, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on the way superheroes are viewed and portrayed in today's culture. Spider-Man, The Boys, Superman, etc. Rob, you got any thoughts on that?
The way the superheroes are viewed and portrayed in today's culture. Well, I mean, Mark Waid did a really good interview back in like the 80s, I think it was, or maybe the 90s, where he was talking about, no, I think it was actually more recently. He was talking about Superman and the reason why Superman's so popular. And he said, if you go back and you look at the publication history of Superman, he changes based on the social needs of society at the time, right? He's basically everything he's everything to everyone at that point in time.
Like that Everclear song.
Yeah, exactly. So if you go and you look at him during World War II, like he was a champion of the Allied powers during World War II. You look at him during the 50s, he was a reflection of science fiction when Mort Weisinger was writing him, Edmund Hamilton, I think, was writing him, and Mort Weisinger was editing him. If you go and you look at him in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, it's a reflection of the hippies, and it's a reflection of whatever the hell society was in the 70s, and it's a reflection of societies in the 80s, right? The lost generation. Like he always mirrors whatever society is at the time, and then kind of presents this idea of like elevating above people's baser instincts. Spider-Man is just, you know, it's the Parker Luck, right? I mean, Spider-Man is just like the kid who was thrown into an impossible situation, made some mistakes, got his uncle and his girlfriend killed, and then, you know, took the rest of his lumps and learned his lessons along the way. Honestly, I think the way that a lot of superheroes are presented in this day and age is good, relatively speaking. Right. I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe nailed Spider-Man with Tom Holland. Right. They just nailed the way the character is supposed to be done. Right. That he is young and is in some ways naive and didn't quite understand what he was getting into with the superhero mythos. And I guess, you know, with Tony Stark guiding him before he died, and now Happy Hogan and so on, that he's kind of getting a better feel for what, you know, for the responsibility that comes with being a hero, kind of truly understanding the words of his uncle, you know, when he told him with great power must come great responsibility. I think the characters like Iron Man, I think that Iron Man was obscure enough in Marvel Comics that they could get away with it. Civil War made him popular, right? But there was a reason why the Marvel Cinematic Universe had to convince people he was not a robot when they made a movie on him, right? People thought he was a metal man, right? They thought he was like Aaron Stack, Machine Man, you know? And the reality is he's a guy in a metal suit, you know? And I think that when you look at somebody like Superman, I think that's really where Warner Brothers has kind of screwed the pooch, because Superman's not supposed to be the dark guy who's uncertain about whether or not he wants to be a superhero, or, you know, is humanity worth saving or anything like that. He's not supposed to be the emo guy, right? I don't like the Man of Steel, and I don't like the depiction of Superman in any of Snyder's films, because he looks like somebody who would just sit around moping all day, smoking cigarettes, listening to The Cure, right? Talking about how like he's just so misunderstood by the world, you know.
Right, you're describing me in my 20s.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the most emo thing ever, you know, and you know, that's not what I want out of Superman, right? Superman's supposed to be the guy who has it all figured out, right? Like Superman's supposed to be the guy that like he never questions, like he knows definitively what the right thing is and the wrong thing is. And in fact, there was a really good moment in Peter Tomasi's Action Comics Rebirth where you had Superman talking to his son Jonathan, and Jonathan was trying to understand like what it means to be a hero. right? And kind of paraphrasing here, Superman's response was more or less, we're not perfect, right? We as superheroes don't always do the right thing. We make mistakes. But the difference between us and your common criminal and what makes us as superheroes better people is, one, we own up to those mistakes, we try to correct them, and then we learn our lessons and try to do better. And that was like just great moral story and moral philosophy that was passed on to his son, because it removes the expectation of being perfect, and it introduces the idea that like you're going to mess up, right? But the important thing is to respect that, to learn your lessons from that, and to go forward. And that in the comics is what makes Superman such a significant character.
Yeah.
In the movies, they've lost that. Right. And like there's no reason for us to be getting a Superman movie where he's like, I mean, I don't know if humanity's worth saving, you know, and you know, it's a little weird, you know, and instead of being the superhero that I'm supposed to be, I'm just going to go be a guy who works on a fishing boat, you know, whatever. You know, it's not supposed to be that way, right? The importance of the lessons that John and Martha taught Clark Kent was that humanity is worth saving, but humanity is imperfect. They're going to make more wrong decisions than right decisions. And it's not necessarily, you know, you don't look at that from the perspective of saying, yeah, humanity's not worth a damn. You look at it from the perspective of saying like they can be better and lead them into becoming a better person. That's the significance of the lessons that they taught him. And those are the lessons that should have been reflected just almost immediately after the movie started, right? Going from his origin into the actual meat and potatoes of him becoming Superman. So I think that it's kind of hit and miss. And I think it's sort of, you know, moves around and changes based on how the characters are being depicted. But it's, you know, when it comes to something like The Boys, obviously it's more toned down. Have you read The Boys from Garth Ennis?
Well, I've read The Boys for like a few issues and I didn't like it. And that's why I haven't watched the show yet. So I need to, I hear the show's good and I heard the comic actually gets super good, but Garth Ennis, sometimes he likes to just, you can tell Garth Ennis hates superheroes. And when I'm reading one of those books, I'm just like, okay, I don't care. And so like The Boys, I dropped out of quick.
Yeah. Which like Billy Powermax said, like humanity can be better. Is that the end of Batman versus Superman? Yeah, it is. It just shouldn't have taken that long for Superman to get to that point. Right, like that's the whole idea. If you ever go back and you read Superman Secret Origin by Jeff Johns, you have like Lana Lang and all that kind of stuff. And one of the important things that Superman learns like almost immediately, and it's a mainstay of his character, is that Lana, one, is the person that helps him learn how to use his powers, and two, combined with her influence and the influence of his adopted parents, that he's just like, I'm going to go off and make the world a better place, and just takes off to Metropolis, right? And like, you know, becomes a superhero out there. He doesn't like take off from Smallville and then just go mope because like, you know, people on Twitter are mean, and then like, you know, decides 15 years later that he wants to be a hero.
Yeah. Well,
you know, he's imbued with the heroic philosophy just right off the bat, right? And
I got you.
Yeah.
I really do like the Zack Snyder Superman films. I don't like the tornado scene with Kevin Costner. The Superman I know would totally save his dad. Like, yeah. I don't even care about that. But right, like Superman is a hard character, I think, for most creators, whether it's in cinema or whether it's in comic books, to actually get, you know. And I think Peter Tomasi got it. Yeah. And the way he brought in Jonathan, and like I really feel like when Bendis came in and they basically just were like, Tomasi, Jurgens, you're done.
Like, it was a terrible decision.
That was a terrible decision because that Bendis Superman run didn't pan out too well, at all. But Tomasi understood him, and the thing is, sometimes people feel like they have to make Superman relatable, like Byrne in the '80s with Man of Steel, and then his run on Superman in action. He grounded him, he depowered him. He did all kinds of things, and I love what you said about Superman being a reflection of the time. It truly, truly is, right? And comics in general are like a reflection of the time. If you want to know what America was like in pop culture in 1974, read a Marvel comic book from 1974. You'll kind of get it, you know? Yeah. I think that what Snyder was doing was he was trying to get us to go on that journey, because most people will say they don't like Superman. And I think it's because Superman represents something like our higher self. He's close to a messianic Jesus type figure almost, right? Like, and I feel like there's something inside of people that doesn't like Superman because he represents something that they know they should attain to, but don't. So maybe Snyder felt the need to like show us that journey and that questioning. But I think once he became Superman, though, like in BVS, like that, I get true Superman in the ultimate cut of BVS. That's just me. But
well, I think a lot of people also find Superman to be boring. right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, what interest is a guy who never makes like morally questionable decisions, right? I mean, that's kind of the irony, right? If you go and you look at Superman you go to any DC comic fan and you say which version of Superman do you like better, the one from the main DC universe or Injustice Superman? They'll be like Injustice. Like, let's ask your fans, everybody out there who's watching this podcast right now, do you guys like the main DC universe Superman or Injustice Superman? Which one do you like more?
Let us know. That's also why they like The Boys, because you're seeing that other side of it, right? You're seeing that inverted Superman.
Yeah, and I feel like they're just going to dump like Injustice, right? They're going to say Injustice is better because like he was a Superman, like his situation was not really relatable, but people liked it more because it was tragic, right? Like the Joker tricked him into killing killing basically his family, right? Lois and his unborn child. And so it's like, damn, this guy goes on a warpath. But like you could disagree with him or you could agree with him, but it was not as simple as, you know, like I'm Superman and I always make the right call because, you know, it's always that way. Having a guy that makes, you know, morally questionable choices, it's cool with Superman, right? Because people are so used to him never making morally questionable choices. And I think that's why a lot of people find him boring. I think that's why Peter Tomasi's Action Comics run was so good, is because it wasn't just a Superman story. It was Superman teaching his son to become a superhero story. And that's what made things intriguing, because it was kind of a new way to see Superman that you hadn't really seen him before. That leading up to that point, New 52 Superman was okay, depending on what story you were writing or reading, and nobody liked Superman Unchained. And then you look at Superman before the New 52, and he's not like, he hadn't, between the death of Superman in the mid 90s going into the launch of New 52, he just wasn't interesting. He just wasn't intriguing, right? They put him through all these different paces. They tried to do everything they could with him. And with the exception of a few different stories, Infinite Crisis maybe, he just wasn't that, there was really not a whole lot to him that I cared about. Yeah. And then you suddenly go into Peter Tomasi's Action Comics, and it's like Superman being a dad and teaching his son how to be a superhero and understanding the stress and the fear and the anxiety that comes with being a dad who's trying to make sure his son becomes a superhero. You know, because that was one of the cool things, is if you go and you look at Tomasi's writing, and I remember talking to him at Comic-Con, and I said, like, what do you think is what makes Superman so intriguing in this day and age? And he said, because if Superman makes one wrong decision, his son could become a tyrant. And it's one of the coolest things, because it's true, right? And that's what made him so cool. So
I wonder if Philip Kennedy Johnson talked to Peter Tomasi, because he's only one issue in to his Infinite Frontier Superman run, but he's already establishing the idea that Jonathan could be dangerous. Yeah. Like if he goes the wrong way, Jonathan's going to be either the greatest hero of DC's future or the villain. I think that's super cool.
And that was teased in the Infinite Frontier Infinite Frontier one shot.
Yeah. And that scene was written by him. Yeah.
Yeah. That you had Wonder Woman, who was hanging out with the Spectre, and he was like, you know, sure, like Jonathan saved a life, but just because he saved a life today does not mean he's not going to eliminate 1 million of them at some point in the future. So like, we'll keep an eye on him. But yeah, that's one of the things that I love about him, right? Because Bendis totally screwed up Jonathan. and I love the idea of Philip Kennedy Johnson kind of coming back and saying, okay, like there's a little more to Jonathan than we think he is. You're not going to see the garbage that Bendis did, but like you are going to see some cool stuff and the potential of him becoming a bad guy, because I'm digging it, right? I like villains. I prefer villains over superheroes every day of the week. So
me too.
Yeah. Villains are always more interesting.
Got a few more super chats. A says, Rob, tell Robbie how your uncle worked for DC Comics and how that influenced you.
I don't remember. My uncle doesn't work for DC Comics.
Okay, there you go. But thank you for the $5. We had a lot of Injustice responses, but we also had some mainline DC, but more Injustice. Twitch says, Rob, given the number of indie comics being optioned lately, have you considered expanding more Marvel and more beyond Marvel and DC? And I will say, Rob has definitely covered Spawn. So.
Yeah, well, I haven't covered it in its entirety, but I did cover Spawn. Armageddon Endgame, whichever one it was, where he becomes like angelic spawn. It really kind of depends. You know, here's a funny thing about indie comics. You know, it's not like Marvel or DC, right? You know, you sit down and read a Marvel comic, and for the most part, you know what to expect, right? Even if you know things are a little wild to a degree, right? You sit down and you read something like Tom Taylor's Superior Iron Man, right, where Iron Man's just a dick. You sit down and you read that, and you're like, okay, like this is pretty far out there, right? Charging people $99 a day to be gorgeous in San Francisco. So it's like, all right, this is a little intense, even for an Iron Man comic. You, for the most part, know what to expect. You go in and read a DC comic, it's the same thing. You read indie comics, God only knows what the hell you're going to see in that, right? I mean, it's, you go from something like Scott Snyder's Witches, right, where like they sacrifice people to get a boon, and they basically put them in trees and they get eaten by witches, to something like East of West by Jonathan Hickman, right, where all the horsemen came back, but like Death came back early, and they have to like go and find Death and find out what happened. There's such a huge, wide, and varying degree of indie comics. I probably will. It's just trying to find an indie comic that I like can be kind of tough. And there are indie comics that I love that I can't cover on Comics Explained, right? Like Sex Criminals. You ever read that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sex Criminals by was it Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick?
Chip Zdarsky. Matt Fraction, Chip Zdarsky. Yeah.
Was it? I thought it was written by him and Kelly Sue DeConnick.
Kelly's his wife. She may have had some. I thought it was just Matt, but it could be both of them.
Yeah, I thought she drew it and he wrote it.
Zdarsky draws it though. Zdarsky draws it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, like, the that story is literally like, for those guys who haven't read it, like whenever like this couple has sex, time stops. So like they literally bust into a bank and start having sex, time freezes, then they rob it and leave. And like, I would love to read that comic or to do that comic on Comics Explained, but like, we got to keep it kind of family friendly. So can't really do that. But I mean, yeah, like, what is it? Why the Last Man? I mean, there are a lot of great indie comics out there. One that a lot of people have been asking me about is Saga, and I couldn't get into it. It's too far out there for me. So
too far out there for you.
Yeah.
Man, I got some comics for you then. That'll be way further than that, man. Because I'm a big supporter of indie. I just love story, and I feel like comics right now and indie comics are really exploding because that's unfettered story. You don't have a Hollywood studio telling you to adapt this novel or to make, to do another sequel to this. Like, you're getting some really cool, interesting ideas in independent comics. We got a super chat from Afro X Station. By the way, if you like anime, you should check out Afro X's channel. He says, Rob, not Robbie, but Rob, just remember that I watched your whole Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe explanation, and I loved it. Your thoughts on Deadpool?
I could take Deadpool in doses. And like small little doses. He's one of those characters where it highly depends on the story, right? And sometimes it even just depends on my mood. Like, if like today you asked me to like remaster Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, I wouldn't do it because I'm just like, I don't care about Deadpool right now, right? He's just not interesting, not funny to me. In a week, I could just be in like a very happy-go-lucky mood and be like, sure, why not? Right? That story's funny as hell. It kind of depends. And that's the thing. Like, Deadpool's just so. He's so all over the place. You know what I mean? Right? Like, I assume you've been reading Deadpool.
Well, Deadpool's not my favorite character because he's so jokey. He's so ridiculous. And a lot of the times I get it, but like, I really like Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force because Deadpool in that run was crazy. Like, he was handled as an insane person. And he also had some growth. Like, his whole thing with Genesis, like, that was beautiful. That was great. But most Deadpool comics, most Harley Quinn comics, I'm just like,
I mean, during Uncanny X-Force, I'm pretty sure that was a story where he'd also been locked in a box for 500 years. So, like trapped in a box for like 500 years.
A lot of thinking to do, Yeah. We got a super chat from Cerebros. He says, no question, I'm just stimulated. So here's some cash. Love y'all. Thank you, Uncle Joe. Appreciate that. I got a question then. Back to the whole idea we were talking about Superman and your thoughts on Superman's portrayal in the recent movies. What do you think would make the DCEU work on the level that the MCU works?
I mean, honestly, I think they need to go back to basics. Did you ever read a lot of comics called World's Greatest Superheroes?
The Dark Horse stuff?
No. It's a super obscure comic from DC, but it was written by Paul Dini and drawn by Alex Ross. And the stories are like super simple, right? But it's like Superman, Peace on Earth, Batman, War on Crime.
Yeah, I've read those. Yeah, War on Crime, Peace on Earth. There's a Shazam one, there's a Wonder Woman, and a Justice League one. Yeah,
there's Justice League.
I love their Treasury size. I love those. Okay,
they're huge. Like, they're just these enormous comics. I think that's what you need because stories like that perfectly capture the characters. Right. And of course, Paul Dini, you expect that, right? I mean, him and Bruce Timm like literally made Batman the Animated Series as great as it was. So they're kind of like the 1-2 punch of like the Batman character in an animated form. So I think that looking at those stories, not necessarily copying them, page for page, but looking at those stories, that's what you need. If I'm being honest, I think with the DC Cinematic Universe, I'd clean slate it all, right? I would just clean slate the whole thing. Whether they want to do it to build into something else, and like the Anti-Monitor comes along and just obliterates the multiverse, but the entire Warner Brothers situation is a complete and total shambles, right? It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
No one really knows what's going on with that whole thing. I mean, literally, the CW had Crisis on Infinite Earths, where the whole multiverse was destroyed, and presumably, the what is it, whatever that guy's name is that plays the Flash in the movies, him along with it, right? Because he meets Barry Allen,
Ezra Miller, right?
Yeah, Ezra Miller, and I believe that the DC Cinematic Universe was one of the universes that was totally destroyed, but there's neither hide nor hair of that in the movies. Right. So like, it's the same issue that the Marvel Cinematic Universe struggled with in the early days when you had Kevin Feige overseeing the movies and Jeff Loeb overseeing the TV shows, and they were just having a pissing match over who gets to run what. And then, of course, eventually Jeff Loeb was ousted and Kevin Feige took over everything, which is why you're probably going to see, the Defenders and all those characters relaunched in the Marvel Cinematic Universe properly now.
Yeah.
But no, if I were them, I would just clean slate it all. I would just wipe the whole thing and just essentially start all over, because I think it's the smartest thing to do, right? Go back to the drawing board, and instead of being so stubborn about it, to look at the MCU and say, like, there's a reason why that formula has garnered multi-billion-dollar movies consistently, right? There's a reason why almost every single one of the movies breaks $1 billion, because they keep it simple.
Yeah.
Right. There's no Zack Snyder there trying to help us understand Superman, who's, and the script of the film has achieved a higher state of entropy. Right. And if we go home and think about the film for 5 hours, it'll make sense to us. Right. It's not what they're shooting for. Right.
Yeah.
They're just like, here's a movie where like Tony Stark becomes Iron Man, and it's like a 3-stage movie, and it's super simple and easy to follow, and it's fun. Right. People can go to the movies, they can turn their brains off and just enjoy it.
Eat some popcorn, drink some soda, and do that. Like now, I do like the Snyder stuff, but whatever. But I completely am there with you on DC. Like, they just don't know what the hell they're doing. I feel like when they kind of got rid of Snyder and they had Whedon come in and do it, and Justice League kind of failed, I feel like they were like, okay, we're just going to start fresh. We got a new Batman movie. We'll do it with Robert Pattinson, whatever, right? And then I think the biggest problem at DCEU was that Wonder Woman was a success, because now they can't let it go. Because now, Wonder Woman worked, Aquaman kind of worked, Shazam kind of worked. Like, so now they're doing another Batman movie. They had another Joker movie. They're doing all these. Just make me a good movie. I mean,
that's not necessarily a guarantee, though, right? Like the Blade movie with Wesley Snipes was amazing, but like it was not officially a Marvel movie. And in fact, they're going back and remaking it. That's the important thing to understand, right? I mean, and I totally get that you're a fan of Snyder, and I get a lot of people are, but here's the thing, I don't go see comic book movies because I want the cerebral experience of like breaking down the meaning and the significance behind it all. Yeah. If I wanted that, I'd go read a Grant Morrison story. What I want is just to be able to go into a theater and turn off my brain for 2.5 hours and just have fun, right? And then that's what I'm shooting for. Now, I get that Snyder fans aren't necessarily looking for that, and that's fine, right? I mean, Snyder fans dig what they dig, and I dig what I dig. But I think that if you look at somebody like Zack Snyder, he would do great if you put him on like a different story, right? Like if you had him make movies on injustice, it'd be mind-blowing, right? He's the perfect director to make movies about injustice. If you had him make movies about the New 52 Earth 2, he would do great on that. Like literally all the superheroes die in the first issue, right? Issue number 1 of the New 52 Earth 2, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman all die, just like that, right? They're all killed by Steppenwolf and the parademons. Yeah. And so like things like that, like if it's an inherently darker story, he does great. But I again, kind of looking at the movies and the direction that they're going in, I mean, I guess you could look at it from the perspective of saying, well, Wonder Woman was so successful, so we can't just end it. But you can't really hinge the entirety of continuing a franchise that is, by all standards of measurement, failing critically. I guess it's making money, but if it's that money's starting to drop off because the reputation and the expectation of a quality film is starting to drop off. You can't really hinge it all on Wonder Woman. There comes a time when it's just important to just cut your losses, right? I mean, you're at the casino tables, you're already down, just walk away before you lose it all. And that kind of feels where the DC Cinematic Universe is at. But that's the thing that sucks about it, is because it's DC Comics. They're the original superheroes, right? If anybody should be smashing box office records and just raking in money hand over fist, it should be DC Comics, right? It should be those guys. It should be the Warner Brothers Cinematic Universe.
They were also the kings of superhero film before well before Iron Man. You know, Batman and Superman were very successful franchises. That's DC. You know, so
they should be killing it, but they're not. So
I think that the thing with Snyder is first of all, I am a big Grant Morrison fan, so I do like the more cerebral experience, but I also love Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like my favorite MCU film is Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2 because it's fun. It's got great adventure and it's got some nice, emotional tonal resonance there, but it's not like trying too hard, but like, I mean, who doesn't love it when Yondu comes down with that damn umbrella almost like Mary Poppins? I'm Mary Poppins, y'all. I love it. It's great stuff. It's fun stuff. And DC doesn't seem to be as fun. And that sucks because DC was super fun and Marvel was always the ones that were more like, oh, Spider-Man, I'm broke. My love life sucks. And Superman's always like, oh, Lois is in bed and I'm going to go save the world. And it was always more positive. But I also understand the idea that Warner Brothers doesn't want to rip off the MCU and do their own thing. But it's so weird. You can totally tell they don't know what they're doing because they have sank millions of dollars into the Snyder Cut, which I am super excited for. But like, what's the point of it? Like, they're not going to do a sequel. They're not going to what's the point? Are you pumped for the Snyder Cut?
I mean, I'm excited for it insofar as I'm curious. But here's the thing. I'm not writing it off. Right. I'm not going to be like, yeah, man, this movie's just going to be 4 hours of the garbage that we already saw in theaters. I'm not really approaching it from that perspective. I mean, I guess maybe a little part of me is, but I'm trying to go in giving it the benefit of the doubt because here's a funny thing. Like this Snyder Cut could come out and it just gets like an 80 or 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. And people are like, this is what Justice League should have been. Right. Yeah. That's entirely possible. It could come out and people are just like, this is worse than the movie we got in theaters. Right. I mean, we don't really know how it's going to unfold because we haven't seen it yet. Right. I mean, there's people out there who seem to be like, this movie's going to do great. And I don't really know how they know that because they haven't seen the movie yet. So I don't know where they're coming from. I guess they're just assuming that because Zack Snyder has made good movies in the past, that he's going to make a good movie now. But like, I mean, there's lots of directors who made good movies at one point and they don't make good movies anymore. Right. So,
that's true.
That's totally possible. But no, I mean, I'm not writing it off. I'm interested to see it. I'm interested to see what it has. So. Yeah.
All right. B Black with the super chat says, how important do you think continuity should matter?
See, DC did this dance with DCU, and I don't know. You answer this question, and I'll base my answer off your answer.
I think continuity should matter to a point, but I don't think it should matter overall. I think that we need to get back to the idea that any comic book or any movie based on a comic book is someone's first. And so we need to understand that a singular Superman, Wonder Woman movie or Justice League movie or comic book, whether it's Marvel, DC, or even independent, like you got to understand this could be someone's first attempt to read your work. And if you don't grab them, if you don't make them feel welcome, they ain't going to come back. Like if they're just lost, so if they just feel like, oh man, I missed the last 80 years of fucking Captain America, I guess I just won't jump in. But at the same time, I love it when they reference something from back in the day. There's a new Superman anthology coming out this week, Red and Blue. There's a story in there by John Ridley where they reference a World's Finest book from like way back in the day. I love shit like that.
I don't know how I feel about Superman Red and Blue.
Really?
I'm gonna read it, but it brings back memories of like Superman Red or like the Man of Energy, Superman Blue, and it's just like I don't know if I want to relive any of the '90s Superman.
You're talking about Superman 2 Electric Boogaloo? Let's do it, man. I
don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I'll read it. I'll definitely check it out. But it's just it's almost like PTSD.
Yeah, we had to go through Electric Superman, Blue and Red. So we don't really want to get too far into that. Afro X with the super chat says, Rob, are you into manga? How do you think Japanese comics compare to American ones?
I'm actually not into manga. Yeah, I find it too weird to read backwards. Okay. But no, I know like there's a buddy of mine, Danny, who runs Geekdom 101, and he's huge into it. Right, he loves the whole thing. But no, I'm not really a fan of manga. I've tried to read it, and it's just not my thing.
Have you read Akira?
No, I saw the original movie though.
You should read Akira. Do you like the movie?
The movie's great. Yeah.
You should read it. You should read the book. Maybe I'll just give me your address. I'll send them to you. I'm just telling you, like, Akira is worth it. Like,
I'll stick with the movie. I'll stick with the movie.
I love it. We got another super chat from Righteousness. He says, so Rob, what if Hank Pym makes a vibranium Ant-Man suit? Your thoughts? Is that a reference to something? I don't understand. Like,
no, I mean, it's a cool concept. I don't really see how it would be any different from. Yeah,
I guess that would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it would be any different from just the regular Ant-Man suit, except you know, if Thor hits him, it'll absorb the impact.
All right, here's another thing I want to ask you real quick. What do you believe in aliens? Do you think we're being visited? Do you think the government's lying about it? Do you think they're being truthful about it? Have you ever had an experience, a paranormal experience, Rob?
Wow, man, this just went off the rails.
Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers.
I will quote Carl Sagan here and say, if it is just us, then it seems like an awful waste of space. So yeah, I would definitely say I definitely believe they are, right? I mean, I think the reality here is that if aliens do exist, that they're making sure that we don't achieve interstellar travel because they don't want humanity going into space and like fucking up the universe. They're like they came here and visited humanity and I don't know, like around the right now, right? Aliens are just like they came to Earth and they're just like, oh my god, look at Twitter and look at TikTok and look oh my god, look at Facebook and look at oh my god, like the whole political landscape. No, man, we don't want them good. No, make sure they don't leave. Can you imagine what Venus is going to be like if humans get there? No,
it's already messed up there. We've messed it up even worse, right?
Yeah, we'd screw it up so bad.
If you really want to lean into it, and I really love leaning into alien visitation and stuff like that, but a lot of it I think is completely just bogus, right? But like the idea that it's timed around the atom bomb, like maybe that's the moment that we launched the atom bomb, like we did that, like maybe that was where the galactic community was like, okay, these apes over here, we need to fucking go talk to them real quick. We need to let them know that they're on the wrong kind of path or whatever. So you've never had an experience, you've never seen strange lights in the skies or anything like that?
No, but it's kind of funny you mentioned that because Jonathan Frakes did an interview where people were asking him about the idea of first contact with I don't know if you ever saw Star Trek First Contact, but I'm a Trekkie.
That's right? These are all Star Trek novels, right?
I was raised on the Next Generation. That original, like that what is it? That William Shatner
Star Trek movie out there. I'm just gonna say.
Which one is?
First Contact. It's amazing.
I don't think it's the best, man. I think the best is, and I know it's going to sound terrible to say, but oh my god, The Final Frontier. Like that's my favorite one. Yeah, I know everybody hates it, but it's my favorite one.
It's right? Okay.
Cry havoc.
Why is that?
Let loose the dogs of war.
That's part 6. That's Undiscovered Country with the Klingon.
Undiscovered Country. That's what it is. That's what it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that one's a great one. Final Frontier is the one where they meet Spock's brother and they go to try to find God.
Yes. Which one was it where they had to go back in time and get a whale because there was like there was this device that was going to show up and like destroy the world.
And they had to have the whale signal. Part 4, Voyage Home. It's a terrible movie, but it's one of the funniest Star Trek movies I've ever seen. Yeah.
See, I was raised on the Next Generation, right? Yeah, like I was raised. I remember watching that with my dad all the time when I was younger. And Enterprise is cool. It's interesting. Did you ever see the tie-in that actually explained what was it? It was Star Trek. It was an episode of Star Trek Enterprise that actually tied into an episode of the Next Generation. Did you ever see that?
No, Enterprise was not my jam. I only watched like the first half of the first season.
So tell
me it's worth it though.
Yeah, there's an episode. It actually, well, the show's not. I wouldn't watch the whole show, but there's an episode. There's an episode that ties into the Next Generation, and then it ties into Star Trek First Contact. And so the idea is that at the end of the point in First Contact, when the Borg ship is destroyed, I think it was, that pieces of it crash landed on Earth. That little time travel sphere that went into the past, pieces of it crash landed on Earth, and those pieces were discovered by humanity at some point in time, and then humanity basically activated the Borg, right? And so like some of these Borg, like they were moving around in the Antarctic or whatever it was, and they were creating this this array dish that would contact the Borg in the Gamma Quadrant, I think it was, and they successfully sent the signal off. And so in Star Trek: The Next Generation, in the episode Q Who, when Q sends Picard to meet the Borg for the first time, they were coming to Earth because of the signal that was sent out in the episode of Star Trek Enterprise, and that Q did that to basically show humanity, like to warn humanity about the Borg. Yeah. And there's a really good episode in Star Trek The Next Generation called Parallels, where Worf keeps jumping from alternate reality to alternate reality. And there's one near the end of the episode, there's one where they send him back through the rift, or they're going to send him back to the rift, and one of the Enterprises fires on him, and it is oh my God, Riker and Worf from an alternate reality where it turns out that like the Borg had conquered everything. And so it's believed that's the reality where they never met Q, and Q never sent the Enterprise to meet the Borg. So there was nobody to stop the Borg when they showed up at the Federation and successfully managed to conquer Earth and pretty much everything around it. But yeah, I'm a huge Star Trek. I love Next Generation. Like I was born and raised on that.
I didn't even know you were a Star Trek fan. So now
I was raised on the Next Generation, man.
Next time we can somehow coerce Rob into being on the show, it's all about Star Trek. I want to know also, when's the Star Trek Explained channel debuting?
It's not coming. There's some things I like to just have for my own enjoyment. Some things I like to just experience for myself. So.
I love it. It works. We got one more super chat. So a nice final question here. Who would win in a bar fight, Daredevil or Nightwing? Rob, what do you think? I'm going to go with Daredevil.
I'm going to go with Daredevil too.
Okay. Tell me why.
His fighting style, I don't think is on the same level as Nightwing. I think Nightwing is a far more prodigious fighter, but I think that Daredevil, with his enhanced abilities, can pick up on things that Nightwing just can't stop, right? Like increased heart rate. His enhanced senses could like allow him to know like how he's going to hit, different things like that. So in effect, you could predict the moves of Nightwing before he does. I will say this though, I think a better fight there would be Bullseye versus Nightwing. Because I think Bullseye would readily beat Nightwing, hands down. So,
yeah, I would actually kind of feel that. I think Bullseye would kill Nightwing, and then it would resolve in this ultimate climatic battle between Bruce and Bullseye, right?
Yeah.
Man, that would okay. Here we go. Marvel DC, we're pitching it for you right now. You do Marvel versus DC Volume 2. Bullseye shows up, kills Nightwing. There you go. Dan DiDio's happy.
Done.
So,
there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Dan DiDio can finally leave.
Yeah,
he can finally go away.
He can finally rest because Nightwing is dead. Doom Droid says, "Do the Star Trek Explained." No, he's got to have something to himself. I understand what that feels like. Star Trek is something to myself. I love it. By the way, there's a book that William Shatner helped co-create because he didn't like his death in Generations, and in that book they reveal that V'ger, the evolutionized version of a Voyager probe in the original motion picture, that's what led to the Borg.
I've heard that. I've heard that theory. Yeah.
So many cool theories there. I really, really like
that. It went off. What is it? It went off and became sentient or something like that.
Yeah. Right. And it's not the best book.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay. Anyway, Rob, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man. Like we need a definitive origin. We need a definitive origin for the Borg, man. Like I always say, make a comic about that, like the origin of the Borg, right? And it's just like a 5-issue miniseries. I'd read the hell out of that.
I would too. Legit. It could be a 50-issue miniseries. I'd get it. That's not a miniseries, 50 issues. Rob, tell us real quick what's going on with you in your life, with your channels. Tell us where to find it. I got a link down below to Comics Explained for the one person here that doesn't know what it is, but just tell us what's coming up.
Yeah. So honestly, I have no idea. I usually plan my videos like a day ahead of time. I used to plan them out like super far in advance, but honestly, that kind of took the fun away. So, you know, I'll usually know what videos I'm going to make like the day they're supposed to be released. The video that I have coming out, actually, what is today, Monday? So I don't know what video I'm doing for tomorrow. I guess I'll have to find one, but,
you just did the Omega Red one, I know, which was awesome.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't really expect that video to do well right now, but the rumor is that Omega Red's going to show up in WandaVision. I'm sorry, in Bucky, what is it? Falcon and the Winter Soldier. If he does, that video is going to blow up. So I'm doing it just in case.
So like right now, you're just like, wow, my Agatha Harkness Explained video's gone crazy over the last few weeks.
Dude, it did, man. Like Agatha Harkness, like Agnes revealed her name was Agatha Harkness. That video got like 400,000 views in something like 3 or 4 days. I was like, Jesus. But like YouTube tip, by the way, predict trends, right? Like keep up with rumors and stuff like that. And if there's a rumor out there, make a video on it. And even if the video, the rumor is not necessarily true, it doesn't matter, right? Like it's possibly true, and people will search for all the information they can on it. And it never hurts. It never hurts to try, right? So like if that Omega Red video doesn't blow up, I don't care. It doesn't really matter to me. But if it does blow up, then that's it's better. So you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So just kind of a tip from a pro YouTuber, if there is such a thing. I don't really think I am. Then keep track of trends and don't stress so much about whether or not a video is going to succeed. One, make sure you keep on having fun, and two, just take a shot, right? I mean, trust your gut. So just go for it. Whatever happens. But
hell yeah.
But yeah, man. So Pop Culture Explained is the other brand, I guess, that I have. And that one is it's not really like it's more or less just kind of keeping people abreast of, or at least the intention was to keep people abreast of pop culture. We realized pretty quickly that like making videos on WandaVision is what people really like. So we're doing more. We're going to do something on like Falcon and the Winter Soldier this week, which I think the next one comes out on Wednesday. Then it's a review episode on Friday when the episode airs. So yeah, I mean that's really all it is at the moment, right? Just kind of the Comics Explained and videos and the Pop Culture Explained videos, and that's it.
Hell yeah. So, by the way, if you guys are not subbed up to Pop Culture Explained, you need to, because when I hit the moment in WandaVision where I was like, I think it's all Agatha. I think Agatha is going to be the biggest reveal we get. Like, I watched Pop Culture Explained in that same freaking week. Rob's talking about, you know what? The MCU does things simpler than we're going in all these crazy fan theories, but it's not going to be that at all. He called that shit weeks ago. So pay attention.
I like how Afro X's like Rob gives a pro tip. I mean, I can give out pro tips all the time, right? Like if you want to grow your YouTube channel, just focus on your impressions click-through rate, focus on your audience retention, and focus on your watch time. You focus on those three things, your channel will grow, right? As long as those numbers are increasing, like your channel will blow up. So yeah, just focus on that. So
doesn't get better than that, y'all. Thank you so much, Rob, for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking some time out of your semi-busy schedule to join us here in the PCP Army.
Yeah,
we love you. You're doing the Lord's work, Rob. Keep it going. And you do have the best voice, so you better ensure that shit right now. Anyway, we love you guys. Station.